You ever see an institution you really trust? A university, maybe a city council, a museum you love, make a decision that just leaves you scratching your head? Like it completely goes against everything they're supposed to stand for? Well, it's this super common, super frustrating puzzle of public life, and today we are going to unpack it.
So yeah, why do good institutions break? We see it all the time, these procedural collapses where everything just seems to go completely off the rails. And the weirdest part, a lot of the time, everyone involved seems to be acting with the best of intentions. It's a real mystery, and it affects pretty much every part of our society.
Now, the first place your mind probably goes is corruption, right? Someone's getting paid under the table. But here's what's so interesting. In a lot of these cases, there's absolutely no evidence of bribery, no backroom deals, nothing like that. So that means we have to dig a little deeper.
Okay, so if it's not old-fashioned corruption, then maybe it's just a clash of ideologies, right? Different groups with different goals. But, that doesn't quite fit either. These failures can happen even in organizations where everybody pretty much shares the same core values. The real answer, it turns out, is a lot more subtle and, frankly, a lot more insidious.
The research we're looking at today argues that the problem isn't a moral one, it's structural. There's this hidden force at play that can warp an institution from the inside out, often without anyone even realizing it's happening until it's too late. All right, let's dive into what that is. So this hidden force has a name. It's called Capital Legitimacy Substitution, or CLS for short. It sounds a little academic, I know, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It's that moment when an institution's decisions stop being about fulfilling its mission and start being about protecting its funding to survive. The logic of money just completely takes over the logic of its purpose.
And this slide highlights a really key distinction. See, unlike corruption, which is intentional and involves people actively breaking the rules, CLS is systemic. It operates within the formal rules. Think of it like a bug in the system's code, not a flaw in the people using it. It can happen even when everyone means well.
So how does this actually happen? How does an institution get to this point? Well, it's not random. It turns out there's a specific recipe, a kind of perfect storm of conditions that creates the ideal environment for this kind of failure. And here they are, the three key ingredients that make an institution incredibly vulnerable. You've got legitimacy scarcity, capital scale asymmetry, and justification ambiguity. When these three things hit all at once, you're in trouble. Let's break down what each one of these really means.
Okay, first up, legitimacy scarcity. The easiest way to think about this is like an institution with a weakened immune system. It doesn't have stable long-term funding, or maybe it doesn't have that deep well of public trust to draw on. This makes it super sensitive to any kind of pressure or controversy, anything that feels like a threat to its survival.
Second, you have capital scale asymmetry. This is when a massive funding opportunity or, on the flip side, a sudden, huge financial risk just completely overwhelms the normal, careful decision-making process. It's like a tidal wave hitting a tiny little boat. There's no time to think or deliberate, you just have to react.
And finally, we have the masterstroke, the thing that really makes this whole process work. Justification ambiguity. This is where the money, whether it's a donation or a budget cut, is cleverly framed as being both the smart financial thing to do and perfectly aligned with the mission. It's presented as a win-win, and that framing lets it sail right past all the usual checks and balances. I mean, who's going to argue against a win-win, right?
So, and this is so important, this isn't just bad luck. An institution's vulnerability to this whole CLS problem comes directly from its design, from its architecture, not from the intentions of the people inside it. Let's take a look at how this plays out in the real world. Okay, this table here does a fantastic job of showing the contrast. On one side, you have what are called high-insulation institutions. Think defense. They have stable, multi-year funding, and their legitimacy is basically assumed. They're structurally shielded from financial panic. But on the other side, you have low-insulation institutions, like many arts and cultural organizations. They're often living on short-term funding and constantly have to re-justify their own existence. This leaves them wide open to CLS. And once CLS really takes hold, it's not just about one single bad decision. Oh no, it's the beginning of a really dangerous downward spiral of decay that is incredibly difficult to pull out of.
So what happens? First, you get procedural compression. Thoughtful deliberation just gets replaced by frantic, panicked reactions. Then, the actual mission starts to erode. It becomes just a bunch of nice-sounding words on a website. And here's the crazy part.
As external trust from the public completely collapses, the people inside the institution might actually feel more confident than ever, believing they just successfully navigated a crisis that, well, they unknowingly created themselves.
This quote from the source material absolutely nails the danger here. CLS is this hidden weakness. It quietly eats away at an institution's resilience. Everything looks totally fine on the surface. But then, when a real crisis hits, the institution doesn't just bend, it shatters.
I know this all sounds pretty bleak, but there is some hope. Because this is fundamentally a design problem, it means it also has a design solution. We can actually engineer our institutions to be more resilient.
But first, we have to understand why all the usual fixes don't work. Calling for more transparency or having a meeting to reaffirm our values, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. These fixes fail because they totally misdiagnose the problem. They don't address the root cause, which is that substitution of authority.
See, the real fix isn't about morality. It's about structure. You can't solve a design problem with an ethics seminar. It just doesn't work. Instead of just telling people to be better, you have to build better systems. Systems with what the research calls procedural containment, institutional insulation, and justification discipline.
So what does that actually look like in the real world? Well, it means building temporal buffers. That's just a fancy way of saying get multi-year funding so you're not in a constant state of panic. It means creating decision-making steps that are non-bypassable. You literally cannot skip them no matter how urgent things feel. And it means building a strict firewall between financial logic and mission-based logic.
And that really brings us to the single most important takeaway from all of this. The problem is not money. Capital is essential. The core problem is the absence of procedural insulation. So the goal isn't to get rid of funding, it's to build institutions that are strong enough to manage that funding without losing their soul in the process.
So the next time you see a good institution make one of those baffling choices, you'll have a new lens to see it through. And it leaves us with one last provocative question to think about. As you look at the institutions in your own life, your work, your city, your country, are they built to last, or are they just built to take the money?